After Burnham's Tesla disappeared in a cloud of dust, Sarah stormed back to her kitchen, hands trembling, as she slammed the HOA violation notice onto the weathered oak table. 17 violations. $250 per day. Per violation. The math made her dizzy. Over $4,000 daily in fines that would bankrupt her before her first major harvest. From across the street, Melissa Burnham hesitantly approached Sarah's property, still clutching the basket of strawberries behind her back. Unlike her father's country club attire, Melissa wore worn jeans and a Stanford Agricultural Sciences sweatshirt. "I'm so sorry about my father," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she glanced nervously back toward her own house. "He's been obsessed with your property ever since the development hit maximum capacity. The last undeveloped plots he has sold for nearly $1 million each." Sarah invited her in, surprised when Melissa knowledgeably admired her heirloom seedling varieties. As they talked over homemade lemonade, Melissa revealed she had completed a master's in sustainable agriculture, but had abandoned her dream of organic farming after her father ridiculed it as playing in the dirt. "He doesn't just want your land gone because it's a farm," Melissa confided. "It's because it represents everything he couldn't control in his own family." Before leaving, Melissa pointed to a section in the violation notice that Sarah had missed, a clause claiming her property had been incorporated by default into Oak Ridge Estates through a process called neighborhood annexation by adjacency, complete with an obscure county code reference. That night, Sarah pulled county records online, finding nothing about any such annexation procedure. The code number cited actually referred to commercial waste disposal regulations. The deception was blatant, banking on her ignorance of property law. The next morning, Sarah photographed every inch of her property line, documenting the clear boundary markers her grandfather had installed decades before. She was examining one such marker when a landscaping crew arrived next door, with orders to clean up the ice or hedge separating the properties. "That elderberry hedge is on my property," Sarah informed them firmly. The crew foreman looked uncomfortable, checking his work order. "Mr. Burnham specifically said this is community property and needs to be removed," he explained, showing her paperwork with Burnham's signature. "That's interesting," Sarah replied, pulling out her phone to display the property survey, "because according to county records, it's 3 feet inside my boundary line." The foreman hesitated, clearly caught between conflicting instructions. When Sarah mentioned she would be filming the entire interaction for her attorney, the crew quickly packed up and left. That afternoon, 3 separate code enforcement officers visited within hours of each other, one for agricultural runoff concerns, another for unpermitted structure investigation, and a third for commercial activity without proper licensing. Each seemed surprised to find themselves assigned to the same property on the same day, suggesting Burnham had called in multiple complaints, hoping one would stick. The last inspector, an older woman named Diane, lingered after completing her paperwork. "Been with the county 27 years, she said quietly. "Your grandfather used to bring us fresh corn every summer. Shame what's happening to family farms these days." She handed Sarah her card with a personal number scribbled on the back. "Call me if they keep harassing you." Some folks at the county office still remember what this land means. As Sarah walked Diane to her car, she noticed a new sign had appeared at the entrance to Oak Ridge Estates. Community ALERT. UNAUTHORIZT Agricultural Operation. Residents advised to report SUSP activities. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Topic: Mitchell Property Acquisition Strategy. Thought you should know." The battle lines were clearly drawn. Sarah took a deep breath, walked to her grandfather's study, and pulled out the leather-bound folder containing the federal easement documents. It was time to prepare for war. The morning after the #FarmOverFraud hashtag went viral, Sarah awoke to the rumble of heavy machinery. Peering through her bedroom window, she spotted 3 landscaping trucks and a small excavator at her property line. Workers in Oak Ridge Estates uniforms were digging trenches along the perimeter where her irrigation lines ran to the community-facing vegetable beds. She rushed outside in her robe, phone recording, as a worker sliced through another pipe. "We're installing a French drain system," the crew supervisor explained without making eye contact. "HOA improvement project. Required maintenance." "On my property?" Sarah demanded. The man shrugged. "Work order says this is the drainage easement. Take it up with management." Sarah called the sheriff's office, but by the time Deputy Rodriguez arrived, the crew had completed their drainage project, effectively cutting off water to a third of her crops. The deputy grimaced as he reviewed her property maps. "Technically, they're trespassing," he confirmed, "but Mr. Burnham has already filed counter-documentation claiming a utility easement. It'll have to go through the courts." The deputy had barely left when Sarah's phone exploded with notifications. Oak Ridge residents were receiving an urgent community bulletin claiming her farm had tested positive for E. coli contamination. The professionally designed notice, bearing official-looking health department logos, warned against consuming any produce from her farm stand and suggested residents who had purchased items seek medical attention for any symptoms. The bulletin was a sophisticated forgery. By the time the actual health department issued a statement refuting the false claims, Sarah had lost a week of sales and several loyal customers. Even more devastating was the accompanying rumor that the irrigation lines had been cut because they were spreading contaminated water into Oak Ridge properties. That evening, as Sarah salvaged what crops she could, Melissa appeared at the edge of the farm, eyes red from crying. "My father's gone too far," she whispered, handing Sarah a USB drive. "These are screenshots of the HOA Executive Board's private chat. They've been planning this for months. They call it Operation Harvest Fail." The documents revealed a coordinated strategy to bankrupt Sarah before her case could reach court. Board members had been assigned specific tasks. One was responsible for daily code violation reports, another for recruiting residents to file complaints, and a third, a former PR executive, for crafting fake health alerts and negative social media campaigns. Most disturbing was Burnham's explicit timeline. Property acquisition target, 90 days. Project groundbreaking, spring. Attached was an architectural rendering of Oak Ridge Heritage Villas, luxury condominiums planned for Sarah's land, with her farmhouse reimagined as a quaint community clubhouse. "They've already pre-sold 3 units, Melissa explained. "Dad's leveraged everything on this expansion. If it fails, half the board faces financial ruin." Before leaving, she added, "Check your property tonight. The security committee is planning something." Shortly after midnight, Sarah's motion-activated cameras captured 5 figures in dark clothing approaching her newly planted winter wheat field. As they began spreading something across her crops, Sarah triggered the sprinkler system she'd installed as a precaution. The startled trespassers flowed, but not before one dropped a crucial piece of evidence, an empty bag of industrial herbicide with the Oak Ridge Estates landscaping logo clearly visible. By morning, a quarter-acre of crops showed signs of chemical burning. Sarah photographed everything, collecting soil samples and the herbicide bag. As she documented the damage, she noticed several Oak Ridge residents watching from their decks, not with hostility, but with unmistakable shame. The tide was turning. What Burnham didn't understand was that his increasingly desperate tactics weren't just destroying crops. They were planting seeds of dissent within his own community. As the days passed, Sarah immersed herself in her grandfather's world. She discovered his meticulous farm journals dating back 30 years, each page filled with weather patterns, planting schedules, and hand-drawn maps of crop rotations. Between the pages, she found pressed flowers, old seed packets, and Polaroid photos of her younger self helping with harvests, memories that had faded beneath the fluorescent lights of her corporate cubicle. The farmhouse revealed its secrets slowly. In the root cellar, she found mason jars of preserved vegetables with faded labels in her grandmother's handwriting. The workshop contained hand-carved tools her great-grandfather had made, each handle worn smooth from generations of use. The dusty bookshelf in the study held rare agricultural texts, including several first editions on sustainable farming practices that predated the modern organic movement by decades. Sarah's corporate friends thought she was having a midlife crisis. Her mother called daily, concerned about her throwing away a perfectly good career to play in the dirt. But with each sunrise, as Sarah watched mist rising from the fields, something long dormant awakened within her. Her first challenge came when she attempted to access her grandfather's bank accounts as executor. The local branch manager, a woman with an Oak Ridge Estates address on her checks, scrutinized the paperwork with unusual intensity. "Interesting," she said, sliding the documents back across the desk. "You know, my husband is on the Oak Ridge Architectural Committee. They've been hoping to acquire that property for years. I could connect you with our development liaison if you're interested in selling." Sarah smiled politely. "I'll be continuing the family farm, actually." The manager's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Farming? You can't be serious. That's not compatible with the neighborhood aesthetic." That afternoon, Sarah received her first official letter from the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, a glossy welcome packet that inexplicably included their complete bylaws, architectural guidelines, and covenant restrictions, despite her property not being part of their development. Attached was a handwritten note, "For your consideration as you plan improvements to your newly acquired property." Sarah might have missed the implied threat had she not noticed the yellow highlighting throughout the document. No agricultural activities visible from public thoroughfares, no livestock of any kind, no structures exceeding 8 feet without approval, no commercial activities without board permission. Rather than intimidating her, the letter crystallized her resolve. The next morning, she drove to the County Agricultural Extension Office where she met Frank Torres, a retired farmer who had known her grandfather for 40 years. "Old Mitchell was smart," Frank said, examining the easement documents. "Got this protection locked in during the 76 bicentennial farmland preservation push. Back then, the feds were handing out these easements to anyone with legitimate family farming history. Once it's registered, it's practically written in stone." Frank helped Sarah decode the legal language and understand the extraordinary protections her grandfather had secured. The easement didn't just permit farming, it required it. The land must remain in agricultural use or revert to a land conservation trust. Development was expressly prohibited in perpetuity. "Your grandpa used to say, they can build their fancy houses right up to my fence line, but not an inch further," Frank chuckled. Looks like he made sure of it. As Sarah walked the property line that evening, watching the sunset paint the mixy mansions in golden light, while their automatic sprinklers hissed disapproval at her untamed raspberry brambles, she felt her grandfather's presence. She knelt and pressed her hands into the soil, cool, dark, and alive with possibility. "I hear you, Grandpa," she whispered. "And I'm not going anywhere." The transformation of Oak Ridge Estates over the following year surprised even Sarah. The living fence of heritage fruit trees flourished, creating a natural boundary that symbolized the new relationship between the farm and the development. Children from both communities gathered there during harvest season, learning the lost art of picking fruit at perfect ripeness. Behind the scenes, the legal aftermath continued. Burnham faced criminal charges for orchestrating the property damage and filing fraudulent documents. 3 board members resigned, rather than testify against him. The development company owned by his brother-in-law filed for bankruptcy protection after investors withdrew following the scandal. For Sarah, victory brought unexpected challenges. National media attention turned her into a reluctant symbol of agricultural preservation rights. She received speaking invitations from farming organizations across the country and was asked to testify before state legislatures considering similar easement protections. Eleanor Washington, whose health had declined after the trial, made Sarah promise to document everything. "Your grandfather's fight isn't over," she insisted. "It's just beginning." Together they established the Mitchell Farmland Trust, using the legal settlement to purchase 2 neighboring properties that had been targeted for development, placing them under similar federal protections. The transformation was physical as well. Sarah's once lonely farm stand became the centerpiece of a weekly farmers market that sprawled along the property boundary. Former HOA security guards now directed parking as residents from surrounding developments came to buy organic produce, listen to local musicians, and learn traditional agricultural skills in workshops hosted by Sarah. Perhaps most remarkable was the Oak Ridge Community Farm Initiative, where the tennis courts once stood unused except during annual tournaments. Raised garden beds now flourished. Melissa Burnham, elected as the new HOA Community Outreach Coordinator, worked with Sarah to develop a curriculum where Oak Ridge residents could learn sustainable gardening techniques. "My father still doesn't speak to me," Melissa confided to Sarah as they watched residents harvesting lettuce from the community plots. "But my mother started growing herbs on their balcony last month." Small victories. The Mitchell property itself evolved from a simple farm into an agricultural education center. The weathered farmhouse, which Burnham had once condemned as an architectural eyesore, was now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Sarah converted the barn into a classroom where local schools brought students for immersive learning experiences about food systems and environmental stewardship. Not everyone embraced the changes. A small faction of Oak Ridge residents still complained about the occasional tractor noise or the indignity of chicken feathers blowing onto their pristine lawns. But even the skeptics couldn't deny the unexpected rise in property values. Farmland adjacent had become a coveted real estate designation as more home buyers sought connections to local food production. On the second anniversary of the court decision, as golden afternoon light bathed both the farm and the development, Sarah hosted the heritage dinner that had become an annual tradition. The long tables that stretched across the property line were laden with dishes made from ingredients grown on land that had nearly been bulldozed. At the center of the head table sat Sarah's newest project, a leather-bound book titled Seeds of Resistance: The Mitchell Farm Story and Guide to Agricultural Easements. She had written it using her grandfather's journals as inspiration, creating a practical guide for other farmers facing development pressure. Eleanor Washington, now using a wheelchair but sharp as ever, beamed with pride as Sarah presented the first copy to her. As darkness fell, solar-powered lights illuminated the orchard boundary between the communities. Children played hide and seek between the trees while their parents shared wine made from Oak Ridge Community Farm's first grape harvest. Sarah slipped away from the celebration to visit her private memorial to her grandfather, a simple stone bench overlooking both worlds. There she found a surprise: Richard Burnham himself, sitting alone in the twilight. Eleanor Washington's cramped office became Sarah's sanctuary in the weeks that followed. The walls were lined with yellowing newspaper clippings chronicling 5 decades of battles between developers and family farms. Among them, Sarah spotted a faded photograph of her grandfather standing proudly beside a much younger Eleanor, both holding shovels at what appeared to be a groundbreaking ceremony. "That was the day we secured the first federal agricultural easement in this county," Eleanor explained, adjusting her glasses. "Your grandfather testified before Congress about the importance of protecting farmland from urban sprawl. His testimony helped shape the very legislation that's protecting your land today." Sarah had never known this side of her grandfather, the agricultural activist, the policy pioneer. In Eleanor's archives, she discovered transcripts of his impassioned speeches about farmland preservation, letters to editors, and meticulous documentation of development patterns threatening local agriculture. "He knew this day would come," Eleanor said, handing Sarah a sealed envelope with her name on it. "He left this with me 15 years ago, with instructions to give it to you if you ever needed to defend the land." Inside was a detailed dossier on Oak Ridge developments, including original planning maps that clearly excluded her property from their jurisdiction, photographs of survey markers, and most crucially, a record of 3 previous attempts by developers to challenge the easement, all defeated. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah and Eleanor crafted a strategic response beyond mere legal defense. If Burnham wanted a public relations battle, they would give him one that showcased the farm's deep community roots. Sarah's first move was educational rather than confrontational. She invited the local elementary school to bring students for a living history day at the farm. Children planted heritage seeds, churned butter, and learned about sustainable agriculture practices that had been used on the land for generations. Parents were sent home with informational packets about the historical significance of the property, packets that subtly highlighted the legal protections, ensuring its preservation. Local media covered the event, featuring photographs of smiling children harvesting carrots against the backdrop of Oak Ridge's imposing homes. The contrast was striking: genuine joy versus manufactured perfection. The headline read, "Historic Farm Connects New Generation to Agricultural Heritage." Sarah also reached out to the state's Agricultural History Society, which promptly designated her property as a century farm, a recognition of over 100 years of continuous family farming. The official plaque was installed at her property line in a small ceremony attended by several elderly farmers who shared stories about her grandfather's contributions to local agriculture. The designation came with an unexpected benefit: a visit from the state's Secretary of Agriculture, who was photographed examining Sarah's innovative rainwater collection system. The high-profile visit forced county officials to publicly acknowledge the farm's protected status, complicating Burnham's narrative. Most effective was Sarah's creation of the Heritage Harvest subscription program. Rather than simply selling produce, she offered Oak Ridge residents the opportunity to become farm sponsors who received weekly vegetable deliveries along with the story of each heirloom variety. Despite Burnham's attempts to discourage participation, the program quickly gained 30 subscribers from within Oak Ridge itself. Among them was Mrs. Weatherby, a respected community matriarch whose husband had been on the original HOA board. After receiving her first delivery of purple Cherokee tomatoes and mortgage lifter beans, an ironic heirloom variety developed during the Great Depression, to help farmers pay off their mortgages, she hosted a garden club luncheon featuring Sarah's produce. The event split Oak Ridge's social hierarchy, creating a faction of influential residents who now had a direct stake in the farm's survival. Eleanor watched these developments with approval. "Your grandfather always said the best defense is good food," she told Sarah. "People forget principles when they're hungry, but they remember them when they're well-fed." What neither woman anticipated was how quickly Burnham would escalate in response to Sarah's growing support. As autumn approached, he was preparing to show exactly how far he would go to remove this final obstacle to Oak Ridge's complete dominance of the landscape.